The point is that 80 is young today, all right? Not old. But back then, folks, the average lifespan, 35. This guy's 81, man. He's the elder statesman. When he speaks, everybody's going to listen. 5 weeks into the Constitutional Convention, it all falls apart. Looks like everybody's going to go home empty-handed. There will not be an agreement. So the elder statesman rises to try to save the day on June 28, 1787, and gives his longest speech to the convention. He says, in the beginning of the contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. Now, before I give you any more of what he said, think about that. He's saying, in the beginning, we had prayer in this room. See, Franklin also, like James Wilson, is one of those 6 guys to sign both the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. So at the Constitutional Convention, he can say to all the other guys in the room, hey, I was in here. I was in this same room a decade ago, and we didn't have a chance. We were going to take on the greatest military power on the planet. We could not win without God on our side. He said our prayers were heard, and they were graciously answered. All of us engaged in the struggle must observe frequent instances of a superintending providence in our favor. Then he asked what we need to ask today as Americans. Have we now forgotten this powerful friend? Do we imagine we no longer need his assistance? I have lived, sir, a long time. The longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. You know this part of a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice. Is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We've been assured in the sacred writings that except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe without his concurrent aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. I therefore beg leave to move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and his blessing on our deliberations be held in this assembly, but only once, and in private, because the ACLU might find out and sue it. What, that's not what he said? Wait, oh no, what'd he say? Every morning. He's saying every morning we got to come in here and publicly acknowledge God together as a nation and ask for his blessing. That's one of our least religious founding fathers. Kind of sounds like a Bible thumping evangelical, doesn't he? I mean, he's taking the Bible out. You heard the scripture in there. He's hitting the other guys over the head with it, saying not only do we need a public expression of faith, we need to do it every day, not private. He didn't say everybody run home in your prayer closet and pray because we couldn't do it on the public square or on the sidewalk or at the courthouse. He said, let's do it here. We're going to do it here to make sure that what we do for this nation actually works. There's no question where these guys stood on that. No question that they wanted that public expression of faith. Godless Constitution? Is it really a godless Constitution? It blows my mind that we say that. I mean, we can show you, there's another presentation we don't have time to do called Restoring America's Constitution, where we show you clause after clause in the Constitution that's traced back to Scripture, where they got all those ideas of separation of power and our Republican form of government, representative government, all comes from the Bible. And they told us that. There's no question that it is not a godless Constitution. In fact, where do these guys get an idea like godless Constitution? I couldn't tell you. Because when you go to the back of their book and you say, where's their endnotes? Where's their documentation? They say, well, we've dispensed with the normal scholarly method of endnotes because what we're saying is so well known. Just trust us on this. I don't trust them. How about you? You know what? Let me tell you something else. I don't trust David Barton. I don't trust Rick Green. If you want to know what the Founding Fathers believed, what they said, don't listen to me. Don't listen to David. Don't listen to Beck or anybody else. Go to the Founding Fathers. It's so easy. All we got to do is read what they actually wrote. All we got to do is read the documents that they gave us. It's all right there. The facts are there. The only time we get led astray is when we ignore it. And that's what the courts have been doing for 40 years. You look at the Pledge of Allegiance case, they didn't mention anything about the Founding Fathers of the Constitution itself. All they did was pontificate on what one judge had said before another judge said this and then another judge and all their 4-part tests and everything else. And for 40 years, they've been taking God out of the public square. Ingle V. Vitale was the case in 1962 that said no more voluntary prayer in our schools. The very next year, they had a case called Abingdon v. Champ, Murray v. Collette, said no more Bible in our schools. That Bible you're looking at, so easy to prove the court wrong. That is the Aiken Bible. We have one of the last remaining ones in our collection of law builders. David's got the largest collection in the country, a private collection of Founding Fathers documents, about 100,000 documents predating 1812, letters to the founders, Bibles to the founders. This Bible was printed by Congress, quote, for the use of our schools. Now, what kind of yahoos are in Congress printing Bibles, putting them in schools? Don't they know that's unconstitutional? So Founding Fathers, the same one that gave us the country. They wanted the Bible in the classroom. Why? Benjamin Rush told us. Father of the public school system under the Constitution, he said the Bible is what we need to teach the kids and everyone in the culture, because if we can teach the Bible and follow the Bible, we'll end slavery, end crime, and all of our social ills. We won't have to punish crime because we'll prevent it in the first place. Fisher Ames was the man that wrote the First Amendment. Give him a hand. I can't tell if you just want me to go home or if you wanted me to take a breath. Fisher Ames is the guy that wrote the First Amendment. We always hear separation of church and state, bedrock principle the nation was built on. I always go to law schools and say, okay, they say separation of church. I say, all right, show me where it is. Declaration of Independence. Nope, not there. Constitution. Nope, not there. Yeah, it is. In our common law class, we learned that. I said, well, take out your Constitution. Well, they don't give us a copy of the Constitution. In law school, they just tell them what they need to know about it, supposedly. You take out the Constitution, you read the First Amendment, it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an established religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's anything about separation of church and state. No, we don't want the entities to be the same, but we certainly don't want you as a pastor to not be able to be in the political realm. We don't want someone that's in the political realm to have to check their faith at the door. They didn't believe in that. They didn't want that. What they didn't want was a Church of England. One denomination suddenly is ruling the whole country. That's what they were trying to stay away from. So anyway, they wanted the Bible in the classroom. The guy that actually wrote those words in the First Amendment, Fisher Ames, he said the Bible should not only be in the classroom, it ought to be the primary textbook of the classroom. There's just no question about where they stood. Oh, by the way, good news. National Council on Bible Curriculum in Public Schools. Now on about 5,000 campuses across the country, we're getting the Bible back into the public school classroom. That is a great news. Y'all can do that here. Go to their website, BibleInSchools.net, or go to our website at wallbuilders.com, and we've got links to it. You can do that with your school here. It's a great way to get the Bible in. It's just used as a literary book, but it's a fantastic program. Of course, you can't pray football games, Pledge of Allegiance supposedly unconstitutional, Ten Commandments supposedly unconstitutional in a school. This case really drives me crazy. It's called Stone v. Graham. Here's what they said. They said if you take the Ten Commandments and you put them on a wall in a school, they said the kids might see them. Yeah, they said if they see them, they might read them. And if they read them, this is for their actual words, if they read them, they might study them. And if they study them, they might obey them. And that would violate the Establishment Clause. I'm thinking, wait a minute, don't kill, don't steal. This kind of sounds like a pretty good thing to be teaching, don't you think? We say, no. What we'll do is we'll change two things in education. First thing is we'll say no right and wrong, no moral absolutes. None of that. We're going to go with moral relativism. You do what feels good to you. I'll do what feels good to me. Do whatever feels good, whatever's right in your own eyes. Oh, by the way, second thing we changed. Student there next to you? Just an accident. They're just a pile of atoms. They're randomly gathered protoplasm. They're not a child of God. They're not a created being. You do whatever feels good to you. Then we're shocked that a student will walk into a classroom, take out a gun, murder a classmate. Friends, we put the formula in place. We laid it out there. We said, don't respect life and do whatever feels good to you. Then we get Paducah, Pearl, Jonesboro, Littleton. The list goes on and on and on. About every 3 months, on average, we'll have another school shooting in America to be buried on the back page. Unless it's as bad as Virginia Tech, it's become part of the culture. Did not happen 50 years ago. Guns were easier to get 50 years ago than they are today. The gun is not the problem. I can take out my .40 caliber Glock, put it right here. We could all stand around and hold hands and chant. It will not jump up and shoot anybody. Right? The gun's not the problem. Why? Because guns don't kill people. Chuck Norris kills people. Oh wait, that's a different presentation. Anyway, no. Guns don't, but seriously, the gun is not the problem. It's the depravity of man, right? And then when you leave men unto themselves, with God not in the equation, with religion not there as a buffer, this is what you get. And the founders told us that. Jefferson said, can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we remove their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God, that they're not to be violated, but with his wrath. Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and his justice cannot sleep forever. He's saying, look, if you ever forget, if you ever remove the conviction that this freedom comes from God, then you will no longer live out your freedom respecting the authority of God. And you see the difference? See, if you know that God's the source of your freedom, you say, well, wait a minute. With this freedom, there's parameters. There's boundaries. There's a concept of right and wrong. But if God's not in the equation and we just get together and as a society decide that we're going to have freedom, then there's no boundaries. As long as I don't hurt you, I can do anything that I want. That's not what the Founding Fathers gave us. That libertarian mindset is not what the Founding Fathers gave us. They said freedom comes from God, and therefore there are rights and wrongs, there are parameters, there's a concept of right and wrong. If we get back to that, we can save our culture. We can keep this country, we can keep this freedom. But we've got to keep God in the equation. We've absolutely got to remember that. Now, last part of the frame, I know I'm going a little bit long here, is pursuit of happiness. This is, all right, she gave me permission. You know what? You know how this is. One person amens and I keep going. So, where's it? Half the crowd's going, please stop, don't clap. We want to go home tonight. Pursuit of happiness is not some willy-nilly phrase that Jefferson just made up on the spot. Of course, John Locke said life, liberty, and property, but John Locke also is the one that coined the phrase pursuit of happiness, and Jefferson had gotten that from his writings. He said in his essay on human understandings, he has a whole section on pursuit of happiness. And he describes it. He says, in fact, he describes it the same way Adam Smith describes the invisible hand. He says, look, if you are allowed to make the decisions for you and your family, you're going to do what's best for you and your family, right? If I'm allowed to make the decisions for me and for my family, I'm going to do what's best for my family. I may make mistakes. At first, when I'm young, I may not think long term, but as I learn from my mistakes, I'll begin to think longer term, and I'll do what's best for my family. And as each of us individually do that, then collectively, all of those individual decisions taking place will produce a better overall result for the community, for the state, for the nation, than if one person stands at the front of the room and says, I'm smarter than everybody else, I'll decide for you what your family needs. I'll make your decisions when it comes to the features on your car and will require you to have these certain things. I'll decide for you what kind of health care you're going to have and what those features are going to be. I'll decide for you how you're going to eat, what you can eat, what you can't eat, and all those things. See, that's the difference between what these guys believed in terms of the pursuit of happiness. In fact, I love this quote from Benjamin Franklin. I didn't realize how they tied free enterprise to all of our other freedoms until I found this quote. He said, the free market is the means under God. That's what we call ethical capitalism. All right, that's because if you take God out of the equation and you just say, let everybody do whatever feels good, that's when government has to step in and regulate, because nobody's being governed by their values, by the concepts of right and wrong. So, is the means under God of establishing the freedom of our country entire. The free market is how we establish our freedoms and how we hand it down complete to posterity. How do you pass the torch intact to the next generation? You make sure you have a thriving free market, that free enterprise is in place, and government is not trying to run everybody's lives. We know this. We know it's worked. We know the evidence is there. America has been the most prosperous nation in history by far, bar none. There's not even anyone that's close, and it's because we let everybody make their own decisions. We let the chaos of the market pick the winners and the losers, not some bureaucrat picking those winners and losers. And that's why we have the most successful economy in the history of the world. The opposite is true when you let one person decide or one small group of people decide. Look at Venezuela right now. The bread lines, the milk lines, it's because you got a socialist dictator making those decisions. But economic principles do not care what you call this guy at the top. You can call him a socialist dictator, or you can call him a bureaucrat. You will get the same result economically, regardless of what the title is, regardless of whether it's one person or a group of people. Look at communism, socialism. We know this. History has taught us this. Socialism does not work, never has, never will, destroys any nation that adopts it. And we need to be reminded of that. The latest poll says of the young people coming up, 1/3 of them believe that capitalism is the best way to go. 1/3 say socialism is the best way to go, and 1/3 don't know. That is a crisis, friends. That is a problem. And we have got to once again get our young people and our people to understand the value of free enterprise, the unbelievable blessing that it will bring, and that it's a biblical form of economics, and it's the right way to go, and we've got to again teach that.